Figuring out your mistakes and fixing them is one of the most effective ways to improve. While it is important to learn new skills, you shouldn't neglect improving the ones you already have. In addition, by analysing your own play, you'll get better at improving by yourself rather than being dependent on outside resources. In this video, I'm going to give a few different methods for figuring out your mistakes. Then I'm going to give some advice for how to fix the problems you've found. At lower levels, your mistakes will be more obvious and also simpler to fix. As your skill improves, your mistakes will become more subtle and often harder to fix. The first way to find your flaws is to pay attention to them while you're playing. Sometimes you do something you know is wrong and get punished for it immediately. For example, you press a heavy button way out of range and get whiff punished. It can be easy to ignore these as one-off mistakes, but I recommend making a note of them as they happen. I recommend an actual list, whether that's on your computer, on your phone, or on paper. Whenever you find yourself wanting to add something to that list more than once, underline it. If you make the mistake a third time, then you know it's a recurring problem. It's not just a one-off mistake, but one you make repeatedly. Note this down as an issue you need to fix. Doing this while playing is easy because it doesn't require you to go out of your way. Watching replays can be tedious, and it also requires going into a separate mode to do. Keep in mind that this method has a lot of blind spots. Often, you'll lose matches because you're in a bad situation, but the reason you got into that situation isn't immediately obvious. This brings me to the second method. Watch your replays, both wins and losses, and keep an eye out for two things. When you end up in a good situation, and when you end up in a bad situation. When you spot either of these things, rewind the replay and see how it happened. If it's a good situation, figure out what went right to get you there. This might seem pointless, but it's important to know what a good round looks like so that you can figure out what goes wrong in the bad ones. If it's a bad situation, you have a bit more work to do. Figure out what went wrong to land you in that situation and what you could have done differently to avoid it. Often, it's going to be a combination of factors. For example, if you find yourself burnt out in the corner, two things have gone wrong. You've been forced into the corner, and you've gotten into burnout. Try to focus on just one problem at a time. Watch the round from the beginning, noting everything that happened to put you in that situation. For example, if you were burned out, did you spend meter when you shouldn't have? Maybe you went for a combo extension that you didn't need to, or maybe you did an OD fireball that put you down a bar. If your situation is being trapped in the corner, maybe you were walking back too much. Getting hit is the easiest bad situation to find, and it can also highlight obvious problems. If you get whiff punished a lot, you're probably pressing buttons too much or at bad ranges. Make a note of any problems you find. Like with the first method, underline repeated mistakes. Once you find mistakes you make often, add these to your list of issues to address. A third method to find your mistakes is to play a long set against someone who you can talk to. This is the least accessible method because you need someone to play with. It also only works if you're playing against someone who's good enough to spot your mistakes. You can find people to play with in community Discord channels, which there are a ton of. You can also travel to locals or enter online tournaments. After you've found someone, play a long set against them, ideally at least a first to 5. The longer the better. Longer sets give more time for the opponent to learn and exploit your habits. Afterwards, ask them what mistakes they noticed you making or any weaknesses they found in your game. This is a great method to learn about your mistakes because it gives an alternate perspective on your gameplay. It is a little bit inaccessible though, especially for newer players. Now that you've identified some problems in your game, it's time to fix them. How you go about this depends on what the specific issue is. Sometimes you'll be able to find a guide that covers the issue and has specific advice for improving. I've covered topics like whiff punishment, spacing, and burnout pressure in other videos. If there are any topics you want me to cover, leave a comment and I'll add it to my list. It's also a good idea to try to figure out how to improve the issue on your own. Here are some techniques that might help. If the issue is execution related, for example a dropped combo, go into training mode and try to land the execution 5 times in a row. Repeat this exercise every time you play before you start queuing for matches. Make sure you're using training mode matchmaking so you can practice your execution between games. If the issue is a bad habit, focus on that habit heavily in your matches. Try to keep it in the forefront of your mind. If your issue is down to not reacting, try to force situations where the opponent would do the thing you're trying to react to. For example, if you're trying to work on your anti-airs, use more projectiles to incentivize your opponent to jump. If you're overusing a certain tool, try playing without it for a few games. If you're underusing a certain tool, try to play a few games focusing on using it all the time, even in situations where you don't think it's good. This advice will make you lose games in the short term. Their aim is to do this until you feel comfortable that you've addressed the mistake. Then you can go back to playing normally. Losing more in the short term to fix an issue will lead to more improvement and more wins in the long term. Hopefully I've given you some tools to identify your issues, and some ideas for how you might go about fixing them. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more fighting game content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.